asking exactly the right questions, which bodes very well for the people of Portland. I mean, one basic thing to do is to remove the barriers, the nuts and bolts barriers to participation that I talked about earlier and that Helen did with her Youth Citizen Assembly. I think one thing that comes out from both Helen's model and Brian's model is that participation, it's not a one size fits all situation. There are a lot of different ways to design participation that can meet people's needs. So one thing is it can be helpful to think of participation with this ladder metaphor from sort of the least intensive rung at the bottom to the most. And people might want to participate at sort of different levels of intensity, and the issues at stake might warrant sort of different levels of intensity, right? So like at the bottom level, the bottom rung of participation, you just have the government informing you about what's going on. And that's helpful, right? Like, I want to know when I'm being surveyed. Be transparent, tell me. But that's really a one-way street. It's really a take it or leave it situation. As you move up the ladder, the government might ask you for feedback. You know, maybe it does a survey, or maybe it holds a public hearing and people can come forward and speak for 2 minutes or something like that. But again, that's not a conversation. It's helpful. The government is gaining information, right? But we, the people, aren't really getting a say in what happens. Okay, let's say you move up the ladder a little more. Now we might be more in a realm of collaboration, right? Where there's really that two-way dialogue between government and the citizens. And that is exemplified in the models that both Helen and Brian have been talking about. And that's where people are going to want to engage. That's where trust can be built. If you feel you're being listened to, if you feel like you can make a difference. Otherwise, it can be really hard to find the motivation in a busy life to engage in these processes. So the more we have these two-way dialogues, the more government is willing to listen, to change its plans, even to abandon bad ideas and doesn't come in pre-wedded to a plan. That's where you start building trust with the community. And that's where people feel like it's time well spent on their behalf. I mean, I guess the highest rung would be giving power to the people ultimately to make decisions, okay? And the higher rungs aren't necessarily better than the lower rungs. It depends on the situation and it depends on what the people want. And so we can invite citizens to help decide what sort of participation they want and how to run the system and how to make it meet their needs, rather than saying, this is how it's going to be. Come if you want, don't come if you don't want, right? They could really have a voice in designing the method of participation. So, you know, the bottom line is, I think people need to feel their input makes a difference. If they don't feel listened to, they're not going to want to participate, and you're not going to have a positive outcome. In fact, you could generate even more distrust. And that's like the worst case scenario here. But the questions you're asking, Hector, are right on, and they make me think that you won't fall into those sort of traps of making people feel like their time and voice is not respected.